In the name of God. How the village boy made the king's daughter speak. Once upon a time, long ago, there was a man who did not like to work. Every morning he left his house, went under a tree, slept there, and in the evening he returned home. This was his habit. One day, as usual, he went and lay under a tree. Half asleep and half awake, he saw two parrots sitting on a branch. The first parrot said, "I have bad news. Tomorrow they will cut down this tree. Our nests will fall, and the baby birds will drop to the ground." The second parrot said, "I have good news. The king of this city said that whoever makes his daughter speak twice will marry her. She sits in her room and does not speak a single word." The first parrot said, "How does this help us? Let's think about saving our nest before it is destroyed." The second parrot said, "I have thought of a plan. This man sleeping under the tree must act so that the workers do not cut the tree. In return, we will help him make the king's daughter speak, and he will become the king's son-in-law." The first parrot asked, "Many princes and important people have tried and failed. How can you do it?" The second parrot replied, "It's easy. I will hide under the lampstand, and you hide under the bed. When the man comes in, he will first speak to the lampstand, and then to the bed. We will each tell a story so that the king's daughter cannot stay silent." The parrots said this and flew away. The man got up and wondered if he had been dreaming. He saw two nests in the tree. That night he set out for the king's palace. He saw a big hall full of ministers, lawyers, and important people. Everyone was talking, but the king's daughter looked at them and did not say a word. The man told the king that he could make the princess speak. The king laughed and said, "Many ministers and important people failed. How can you do it?" The man replied, "They have all tried. Let me show my skill." The ministers agreed that it was worth trying. The king accepted. The man said, "I can make anything speak. I will tell two stories, and then I will go to the princess." He first turned to the lampstand and said, "Tell me a story." Everyone in the hall wondered what he was doing. But the second parrot, hiding under the lampstand, spoke. Once there was a king's son who had a wife. When she walked, she put her feet on the ground as if the earth owed her. One day she went to the mirror and asked, "Is there anyone more beautiful than me in the world?" A parrot was nearby and said, "Who are you? I will find a wife for the king's son, so you cannot even wash her water bucket." The woman hit the parrot, and its feathers fell to the ground. The parrot hid in the chimney of the oven. That night the king's son came home and saw feathers on the carpet. He asked his wife, "Where is the parrot?" She said, "A cat ate it." Suddenly the parrot spoke from its hiding place. "The cat did not eat me. You hit me." The king's son asked, "What happened?" His wife told him everything. The king's son laughed and said to the parrot, "How can you bring a wife?" The parrot said, If the prince listens to me, it is easy. First, you must go to the mountains and find the mare. The mare will have a foal, and you must raise the foal in a high place. Then I will tell you what to do." The king's son noted the mare's location and set off, traveling until he reached where the mare was. He saw a thin, weak horse standing and trembling, with so many crows pecking at its back and sides that it looked like a beehive. He thought to himself, "How can this dying creature ever have a foal?" He was about to turn back empty-handed, but then he said to himself, "Taking it won't hurt. Perhaps there is some wisdom in this task." He placed a bridle on the horse and took it with him. Some time later, the mare regained her strength and gave birth to a foal. They raised it in a special place. After 3 years, the foal became a unique horse. If you turned its left ear, it would fly in the air. If you turned its right ear, it would return to the ground. One day, the king's son mounted the horse and twisted its left ear. The horse rose into the sky, higher and higher, until the earth looked no bigger than an egg. There, a parrot said, "Now twist the horse's right ear." It landed in front of the palace of the fairy king. The parrot told the prince to hide because the palace had many guards. The parrot wrote a letter and dropped it through the vent of the princess's room. It landed perfectly on her chest. When she woke up and saw the letter, she immediately called her maidens, shouting at them, "Were you asleep? How could someone place a letter on my chest?" The maidens replied that they had checked everywhere carefully. "This must be the work of a bird," she said. Meanwhile, the princess thought that anyone who had taken so much trouble to deliver this letter must really care for her. She wrote a reply, left it on her chest, and went back to sleep. The parrot arrived, took the letter, and wrote back, inviting her to a certain place. The parrot took the reply to the prince. The princess, upon waking and reading the reply, set out at once and traveled until she reached the prince. When the princess saw him, they fell in love immediately. They rode the horse, and the prince twisted the horse's left ear, then flew over the sea. Suddenly, the prince made a mistake and turned the right ear too soon. The horse fell into the water. Both fell, but managed to survive. The prince was caught by an old man who changed his clothes and made him work. He became a servant, forgetting he was once a prince. The princess was carried by the water and got stuck near a mill. The miller saw her and helped her. The girl pretended and said, "I am an orphan and fell into the water with nowhere to go. If you agree, I will stay here and take care of your work." Since the miller had no children, he agreed, and she became the miller's daughter. After some time, one day, she was washing dishes by the spring, and the king's son of that city, who had gone hunting, brought his horse to the spring for water. His eyes fell on the girl still washing the dishes, and, at first sight, he fell completely in love with her. He quickly went to the king and said, "You must get me the daughter of such and such a miller." The king flew into a rage and said, The king's son and the miller's daughter? Have you lost your mind? You must marry a princess or a minister's daughter. It is a disgrace for the king's son to marry a miller's daughter." But the prince's heart was stubborn, and he was determined, insisting that he would have no one else but the miller's daughter. The father, having no choice, took his wife and went to the miller's house to ask for the girl's hand for his son. The miller, more than happy, immediately agreed. The wedding preparations started. The day before the wedding, the girl went to dry wheat on the roof. She told the neighbors that the sun was not strong and the wheat would not dry. The girl was busy talking when, by chance, the king's son, who had now become a worker, brought some wheat to be milled. Suddenly, his eyes fell on the girl, and she saw him too. They immediately recognized each other. The girl quickly went downstairs and, so that neither the door nor the neighbors could see, greeted the prince. She told him that tomorrow they would marry the king's son of this region, and he must act quickly to find his horse and bring it. Since the horse was grazing nearby and no one could ride it, the prince went and found the horse. Late at night he returned to his master, who was annoyed with him, but the prince didn't care. Early the next morning he asked for permission to go to the king's son's wedding celebration. But his master was amused by the king's son's actions and kept scolding the prince. Still, he told his worker to go. The prince headed toward the miller's house and saw people gathered all around it. As soon as the bride was brought out in her wedding dress and the horse was placed before her, she said that they must bring a wild horse for him. The king was offended and said, "They have brought the finest horse of the palace. What use is a wild horse?" The girl insisted that, no matter what, the wild horse had to be brought. The king had no choice but to agree and sent a few men to catch the wild horse that was standing a little farther away. They tried everything, but could not even reach the horse's mouth. In the end, the prince went and said he could catch the horse. The groom told him to do it and promised a good reward. The prince approached slowly, took hold of the bridle, and gently stroked the horse's mane and neck. The horse, recognizing the prince, calmed down, and the sound of the people's cheers and joy filled the air. The prince brought the horse in front of the bride, and as soon as the girl mounted, he jumped on behind her and turned the horse's left ear. The horse suddenly lifted off the ground and soared high into the sky. It flew on until they reached above the king's son's city. There, the prince turned the horse's right ear, and it descended to the ground. They landed in the middle of the palace courtyard, and the prince helped the fairy princess off the horse, covering her face. When he returned to his own mansion and met his wife, she was overjoyed and asked where he had been all these years. The prince told her everything. When night came and dinner was served, as soon as the princess tried to wash her hands, her veil fell off. The prince's wife saw her and immediately fainted, dropping the basin and collapsed to the ground. When she regained consciousness, the parrot said, "Didn't I tell you I would bring a woman you couldn't even serve as a maid?" The wife agreed, admitting that the parrot was right. After a few days, the weather grew cold, and the king's son and the fairy princess were sitting by the fireplace, when a strange parrot appeared at the window, fluttering its wings. The parrot told the king's son that his friend had come and was inviting him to a wedding. The prince agreed and said he must bring a gift for her. The parrot went away and after a while returned, bringing with it a seed, saying, "Anyone who eats the fruit of this tree will become young." The prince planted the seed, and very soon it grew into a large tree. When the fruit ripened, a dragon came and ate the fruits at the top, spilling its poison over the rest. The king's son, unaware of this, picked a fruit and wanted to test it first on his dog. As soon as he gave the fruit to the poor dog, it fell down and died instantly. The prince was devastated and killed the parrot, naming the tree of Death. Some time later, the prince's grandparents quarreled, and the grandfather, angry, said he would eat the fruit of the tree and kill himself. He ate a few fruits to die quickly, but nothing happened. Instead, he became as young as a 14-year-old. The news was sent to the king's son, who realized that the poor parrot had been right all along. When the king's son saw his grandfather, he regretted what he had done. The parrot remained quiet under the lampstand, and the man who had come to make the princess speak said, "He did well to kill the parrot. That parrot hadn't really been of much help to him anyway." As soon as the girl heard this, she could not contain herself and said, "He didn't do the right thing at all. The parrot had done a great favor for him." The people in the hall, upon hearing the girl's words, began clapping, and the girl realized she had broken her silence. The man, now emboldened, went toward the princess's bed, faced it, and said, "Now you must speak. Tell us what you have in mind." The parrot under the bed said, "Once upon a time, there was a man who acted like a lion at the dinner table, but at work he was lazier than the laziest fox. On the other hand, there was a king who had a son and wanted to marry him to the princess of another kingdom. But the prince refused and said he must find his own bride. A quarrel arose between the father and the son, and the son, who was a bit simple-minded, left the palace and went away. However, the king had a wise minister, and this minister told his son, "You must go with the king's son. Do not let him endanger himself. Keep an eye on him and return with him." The king's son and the minister's son set out together. They traveled far and wide until they reached another city. There they came across an old woman. As soon as she saw them, she said, "Hide yourselves quickly before the king's daughter sees you, or you will lose your heads." The boys, confused and startled, asked, "What's going on?" The old woman replied, "The king's daughter has ordered that every male creature, human or animal, must be killed on sight." The minister's son said to the old woman, "Ask the girl why she is doing this." The old woman replied, "No one dares to speak to her like that. She has killed all the men and spared only her father." But the vizier's son, determined to uncover the truth, insisted that the old woman must go and find out what was behind the princess's cruelty, so that no more innocent people would die. When the old woman saw that the boy wouldn't give up, she agreed and went to speak with the king's daughter. When the girl heard the question, she burst into anger and said, "This is none of your business. If you say one more word, I'll have your head cut off." The old woman returned, but the vizier's son kept insisting until the next day he sent her again. The old woman went, and as soon as she saw the princess, she broke into tears and said, "I nursed you all my life, and now you won't even spare a few words for me." When the girl saw that her nurse was upset, she said, "I had a dream one night. I dreamed I had become a young gazelle, and a prince, who had also turned into a gazelle, became my companion. We wandered together across the plains. We traveled until we reached another kingdom. The king's hunting dogs attacked us, and we both ran for our lives. As we were fleeing, the prince gazelle's leg got stuck in a hole. I went and brought water in my mouth, poured it into the hole until the soil softened and his leg came free. Then we continued on our way. After we had gone several leagues farther, this time my leg got stuck in a hole. The prince gazelle left me there and ran away. The hunting dogs reached me, tore me to pieces, and ate me. When I woke up from the dream, I held a deep grudge against all men and swore I would kill every last one of them. The old woman said, "If that's how you feel, then do whatever you wish." She returned to the vizier's son and told him everything. When the vizier's son heard this, he devised a plan. He crafted a golden gazelle and, at night, sneaked through the palace window into the princess's bath. He threw a cloth over his head, hugged the golden gazelle, and cried out, "Ah, my gazelle! Ah, my gazelle!" In the middle of the night, the princess heard the voice and realized it was coming from her bath. She quickly got up, went to the bath, lifted the cloth from the boy's head, and said, "Who are you, and what are you doing here?" The boy replied, "I was a gazelle, traveling with a female gazelle, when the king's hunting dogs chased us. My leg got stuck in a hole, and the gazelle brought water to free my leg. Then we continued together. This time his leg got stuck in a hole, so I went to fetch water. The spring was very far away. When I arrived, I saw that the hunting dogs had torn the gazelle to pieces." As the boy told the story, he wept and stroked the golden gazelle. The princess realized that this was the same dream she had also seen. When the boy finished his story, the princess struck her head and shouted in anguish, saying, "I was the female gazelle, so you weren't at fault." The boy replied, "No, it wasn't you. That female gazelle looked completely different." The princess calmed the vizier's son, and the next day decreed that she would no longer kill any men, and that they were free to live like women. When the boy saw that the princess had calmed down and stopped harming men, he told her the truth. "I lied. That gazelle was the king's son, who is now hiding somewhere, so ashamed of himself that he hasn't dared to step outside his house to come to you." The princess then instructed the boy to go and bring the king's son with him so she could see what kind of person he really was. The vizier's son brought the king's son to the princess, and as soon as she saw him, she remembered how tirelessly he had struggled to fetch water. Her heart softened for him, and she gave him her affection. She told the king's son to stay at her palace that night. He spent the night there, and they talked about everything, making plans to marry the next day. The princess ordered the city to be decorated with lights, and proclaimed a celebration lasting 7 days and 7 nights. The people, relieved that the princess had come to her senses and would no longer harm men, all flocked to the palace and its surroundings. On the 7th night, the princess was married to the king's son. He stayed in that city for a week, but soon missed his parents. He took his bride, and together with the vizier's son, they set off toward their own city. As they were traveling, the king's son thought to himself that it would be better to kill the vizier's son. He worried that if the people found out, they would say that the vizier's son had found a wife for him, and he hadn't had the courage to do it himself. Quietly, he approached the vizier's son, drew his dagger, and struck him down. The parrot under the bed remained silent. The man who had once made the princess speak stepped forward and said, "The prince did well to kill the vizier's son. It wasn't your business to interfere with the king's son." The princess, furious, could not contain herself and said, "You men are all the same. One should never close their eyes to the good deeds of others. The king's son did nothing right at all." The people in the hall began clapping again. The princess had now broken her second vow of silence. In the end, the villagers succeeded in making the king's daughter speak twice, and he emerged victorious in the challenge. The next morning, the man got up early and went to the tree where the parrots' nests were. He saw the workers with saws and axes ready to cut down the tree. He asked, "What are you doing?" They said, "We are planting barley here, and the shade of this tree prevents it from growing well." The man replied, "You will be compensated for any loss. Leave this tree alone this year and cut it down next year." The workers agreed, and when the parrots heard that the tree would remain, they were delighted. The man, relieved, returned to the palace to marry the princess. By the king's order, celebrations were held throughout the city with music and revelry, lasting 7 days and 7 nights. The princess was married to the man, and he, without much effort, finally lived happily ever after.